This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by Content Marketing World, the world's premier content marketing event. Find out more at contentmarketingworld.com today. Use the offer code BeanCast. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 553. Colin Gets Licked. For Monday, July 29th, 2019. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norton. Thanks for joining us. The growing user base for creating and viewing stories is making this a social media feature that's very attractive to ad buyers. Not to mention the unit costs are low and they are extremely effective. So should you be considering a story campaign? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, trusting the Twitter rebound, whether agencies should own first-party data, the impact of banning the sale of a user's location, plus the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the Digital Creative Director for AFG. Mr. Colin Glom is here. Colin, what's going on?
Everything, Bob. Everything. It's great to hear the melodious tone of your voice. I'm super excited to be on the show tonight.
I'm glad it's melodious. It didn't sound so melodious when we were getting ready for the show tonight. And next, he's President and Chief Creative Officer of New York agency Allscope and a board member of Mashburn Enterprises, Mr. Jonathan Sackett. Jonathan.
Gentlemen, I'm so glad to be here as usual.
As usual, you are. Well, I got an interesting topic to start off with because it's something that I know about, I see all the time, I've experienced, but I do not use this service. I'll be completely honest. But the Stories feature, first introduced by Snapchat and now co-opted by every single one of the Facebook properties, from Messenger to WhatsApp to Facebook to Instagram, is growing in popularity among ad buyers. The combination of lower unit costs, growing user base, and the effectiveness of it overall make marketing there pretty much irresistible. Someone's making a lot of noise, but be careful there. But the usual questions arise for me, Colin. Is this a lasting growth trend? Will it remain effective? Is it too intrusive? I mean, what's your take on stories, and are they a good ad unit? Should marketers be considering using them in a more intentional way?
I think the easy answer is, as long as they keep them at insanely cheap prices for the rest of the platform, Stories is by far the best value for my clients. And they're also more interactive than a lot of the other ad units that you see on both of the platforms. So my clients have seen a great deal of success with them. They also are, it's kind of like a stream of because it's always on, it feels like a stream of different stories that are being told across all your different friends. And then you can slip one in there. It kind of feels like you don't want to jump out of it because you know another friend of yours is going to be right after it. It almost feels a little bit like a TV commercial. But my clients are really seeing a lot of success with it because there's the ability to swipe up and then get into a deeper experience. And that's where they're really making a lot of their digital efforts are being put against creating those specific units. Now, the thing that's interesting about Stories is that you have to shoot specific content for just that particular kind of unit. It's the only one that's specifically vertical across the board. It's the only one that has live action for the most part. Or you want to have some kind of live action, you don't want still images so much. I think they're, as long as specifically Instagram and Facebook keep them really, really cheap, I think they're over-indexing, and that's why as soon as there's a new ad unit that comes out that they want you to use that one instead, everyone will jump to that new ad unit. But for right now, it's the best bang for your buck on the platform.
I have so many questions. So many questions are coming to mind. First and foremost is you mentioned how video is kind of the norm, that you need to be doing something like that as opposed to still images. Yet for me, when I go through these stories and I end up on a brand story, the still image ones are probably more attractive to me often than the video ones are, because it's just like they're more playful. They have writing on the picture. They're showing me product. Admittedly, it's mainly fashion brands, and I'm really interested in the products what they're showing me. But it's interesting that you think video is working better. Do you have data to support that?
Well, it's not. I shouldn't just say video. I should say animation, right? So some of the things you were talking about, text overlays that build, the arrows that point, those kinds of things. All that interactivity, or that I should say engagement, that can be built over the course of the 5, 10, 15-second engagement that you have, is part of that narrative, right? So you can tell a little story inside of it. I think just a static flat image is not as engaging as something that has those kinds of bells and whistles on it. I still think video, yes, is going to be one of the more dramatic.
I want to weigh in on this. You know what? First of all, I got to say this. Colin is definitely one of the smartest guys I know, is particularly in this industry. So, I'm certainly would never be combative with you, Colin, because I think you're smart and you're right. You're handsome.
Hey, Colin, I think you just got licked.
Tough crowd tonight. Anyway, but Colin, you're right, and I'm glad that you said interactivity, because we both know polling and degree of interactivity. Animation grabs the attention. Degree of interactivity keeps you there, and the scrolling aspect of it as well. Because let's face it, there's an inherent brain function reason behind the infinite scroll. It keeps you around. It sets your session. It sets your duration. And if you can, keep that degree of interactivity with the brand or whatever the messaging strategy is, that's what's going to be key. Now, Colin, this is why I'm setting it up this way. I'm interested in your perspective on this because of all of the bugs. There's been we've seen a lot of bugs. Now, remember, I don't really handle the media buying aspects of it, but the planning and the buying aspects of it, I'm hearing about a lot of bugs in the system and a lot of problems.
There are, and it's not the easiest thing in the world for brand managers to do themselves. And just every time you upload something, it's a hit or miss as to whether or not it's going to work the way you thought it was going to work. Especially with the things that you're talking about. I have some friends who are experts at it, and their degree of sophistication that you can get when I show that some of their work to the brands that I work with. I'm like, hey, you could do something that's more fun, more playful, a little bit more dramatic by doing this. And they're like, well, how do I set an ad for that? And I was like, okay, you have to go into the platform itself. Doesn't really allow.
It's not supportive. I think, listen, of course it's going to work better. Yeah, it's going to, and it's not allowing for my team. It's not allowing for the expansive creativity that we would like to deploy.
Yeah, I think in this instance, the ad units themselves, or the platform itself, is stronger than the dashboard that you have access to.
Okay.
I think that's something that's going to have to catch up over time.
Is this something we're talking about over time and how things are going to improve? But is this really a long-lasting platform? Do we really believe this is anything but opportunism? Right now because people are interested in it. It just smacks uncomfortably like the original banner ad that got 25% response rates. It's just like they were novelty at that time, and so people engaged with it. Do we really think that people are still going to be using stories 5 years from now?
I would go with probably not to the degree that they're using them right now. And again, it goes back to the novelty, like the fact that it's something new. Something that's fresh, and it's also something that people haven't seen before, so they are at least are just now starting to be more exposed to, I should say.
Yeah, and a lot of the agencies too, and hey, I'm part owner of one, so I know. But what happens is it's crowd herding, so it's kind of like that. store that opens across from another store, so everybody runs over to that one just out of morbid curiosity. But it is being pushed as well because we're told to push it because of better statistics around it in a bug-filled system.
Yeah, and I also would argue that there's going to be another ad unit that comes out in the next 5 years that will become the new, shiny bright toy that everyone flocks to. So that's the cycle that we've seen, and that's the thing that's going to continue to continue. It's going to continue to happen. So whether or not this is still a real issue in 5 years, that remains to be seen. I think it's really going to be predicated on how inventive the platforms are in releasing new units to their consumers.
Colin Glom is one of the smartest men I know.
Yes, I know. Colin, Colin, you mentioned TV, that it's like TV watching episodes of your friends' interesting events or whatever, but it's modeling TV, and then brands get involved and it's kind of accepted like a TV commercial. Is the real underlying truth of why stories work for brands that the actual tool itself is creating a lean back behavior as opposed to a lean forward behavior? Because no matter how much we tweak the timeline on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or anything like that, it's a very lean forward activity scrolling through there. Whereas when you're watching stories, it's kind of sit back and watch, right?
Correct. Yeah, and I was actually going to mention that when Jonathan was talking earlier. This is one of the new wrinkles in the platform. I think that's one of the reasons why they're pushing it so hard, is because now it's even taken the thumb scroll out of the effort. Right? It's now something I can just sit there and stare passively at the screen, and with the exception of Xing out of it to get out of it, it's just going to continue to go and go and go and go and go. So they've even gone so far as to engineer the behavior out of the thumb scroll from the platform. I think that's one of the reasons why they're so invested in making sure that people are advertising on it and that people are looking at them.
You know what's interesting about that too, Colin? I don't know if you knew this. They did a heat mapping study with that they announced they were going to do, and then they never released it. Did you know about that?
No, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, so you guys are familiar with eye mapping, heat mapping,
yeah,
whatever.
Very familiar.
So they had announced that they were going to do that for the obvious reasons that it was going to prove a thumbless infinite scroll is going to be more effective to the average person, and then provide guidelines on how to gravitate the eye towards where you want it. But then the study was done and never released, so that was kind of questionable to me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder if it contradicted exactly what they were trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
The last question that still lingers in my mind is the intrusiveness factor. I mean, right now, you're accepting the fact that a brand that you follow might show up in your infinite scroll, but what if brands are starting to show up who have nothing to do with you personally, and it's just because they're after you and it's like a third-party marketer? Is this too intrusive? Because this is not like television in the sense that you're watching content that's being supported by an ad. You're watching content from your friends, and this is being inserted into your friend stream. And I'm just wondering, how do you feel about that? I mean, obviously users are not all that worried about it at this point, but will they?
I think that well, let me answer that in two different ways. One, I think it depends on the platform, right? So Instagram, I've said this before on the show, I think Instagram is more of a discovery platform. That's why you see it's way more effective in the advertising space, because people are there to see parts of the world that they've never been to. You follow more people that you don't know on Instagram than you do on Facebook. So I think those two things working in concert allow for people to say, okay, I'm in the mindset to be interrupted or see something new and different or novel that I've never seen before. I think stories on Facebook is a different play altogether. So
this isn't an interchangeable thing. This is not something like you can build one story and then launch it on all the platforms and it's going to be equally effective.
No, I don't think so at all. I think Instagram is way more effective as an advertising platform than Facebook. I continue to say that to my clients all
Well,
the time.
it's way more effective as a marketing platform as well.
Correct.
I mean, it's just like it gets you to the purchase a lot easier, a lot quicker.
Yep, I agreed, 100%, 100%.
Now,
but in terms of like, just to go back to your question,
okay,
the advertising is now getting putting into Messenger, right? Like, so you're starting to see more and more brands popping up in places that are extremely personal and extremely private.
right?
And I think stories is the least of the issue. You know, like when you start seeing like all of a sudden there's a DM from somebody that I haven't even wanted to speak to, and they're in my scroll of personal messages that I have privately with a bunch of friends. That to me is like a whole nother bridge that we have to cross.
That would be a total deal breaker for me. I'm already annoyed to death when people send me Facebook messages.
It's already starting.
Well, that's the thing. I'm already annoyed about that as well. I mean, we all are. That's the context of the content that the technology is reading, right? I mean, it's not that far off from in one of my feeds there was a sponsorship by Kraft because school lunches coming up, and it was talking about a school shooting. So the you can see where the technological implications of a contextual buy or a contextual placement can backfire on you. It's the same thing. It's just that we're marketers and we know this. The average person out there that isn't involved in this particular industry, they don't care if you're reading their emails. That's what launched Gmail. They don't care if you're reading their streams. They don't care if you can take my picture and use it in an advertisement. They don't care, and they actually brag about it because they don't understand the data implications of a contextual buy.
Yeah.
Well,
I was going to save this for later in the conversation, but if you guys haven't seen it yet, run out to see The Great Hack. I was invited to see a screening of it with the director and some of the main cast members at the Core Club this past week, and it's a documentary about basically the Cambridge Analytica story, but it goes way deeper than that.
Oh,
It shows you how very vulnerable the American public is when this data and the amount of intelligence gets into the hands of people who want to change behavior in a way that is not suited for, a democracy, essentially.
Well, let me
very interesting.
Let me shape the conversation to one last point before we move on here. What makes for a good stories promotion? And I'm not talking specifically about the content itself, because from that standpoint, I think we've covered it. Video works well. Lots of motion graphics and other types of things work well. Compelling messaging. But what about the support of a stories campaign? Does it need to be thought of as a direct marketing thing? Is it mainly a branding thing? How do you support it with advertising? Do you support it? Do you drive people towards your stories, or do you just allow them to happen organically? I mean, Jonathan, what's your experience?
Okay. Yeah.
Jonathan, what would be your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd be interested in Colin's perspective on that.
Okay, we'll go to Colin then.
My take on it is that you don't really have to push people to stories. The platforms themselves put them in front of the consumers at a very high rate. As you've seen when you scroll through on, say, Instagram, every couple of jogs with a thumb, you're going to see those series of stories that are in there. You might even click on them accidentally. With like a fat thumb situation. And if you don't, they're already at the top, baseline there anyway. So I think the promotion of them doesn't need to be further than just having them there. I think one of the things that's very successful is temporal. Stories are meant to be short bursts that are happening in near real time. So if you want to talk about an event that you're doing, if you want to cross promote something from a geolocation nearby situation, if you have a sale that's going to have just a finite amount of time associated with it, say a couple of hours, those are the things that you use stories for from a marketing standpoint. Anything that has a short time frame and something that you want them to act on immediately.
Yeah, I like that. The one thing that I was going to say, aside from short bursts, is geofence. And I think, because there's a number of drill downs that you can have, that are correlated with what you're trying to convey. And I think short bursts, that's exactly what that platform was meant for. Short bursts of information, short bursts of duration. So there's only a limited amount of time around something, and the content itself in a compelling way. I remember, when we were built back when it was website, before it was social platform, it was all about, there's a direct correlation between degree of interactivity and conversion. So I think that it's content and context mixture with that limited time messaging. So, and again, it also is dependent upon the industry, the location, blah, blah, blah. But as a rule of thumb, those three things are what's going to convert or work.
Yeah. The one last thing to note there is that one of the fun things about stories is that you can watch something happen over time, right? So if I get sucked into something right off the bat and I stick with it, let's say that a story has, or a brand story has 18 components to it, and you see all of them lined up, you're like, all right, what's going on here? And you see getting ready for the event, seeing the people arriving at the event, then you see who showed up at the surprise. You can actually show in pretty cool detail all the things that might be happening around a brand, and show that it's sequential, something.
Well, that's interesting that you said that, because obviously, because of my tie-ins, we're tied into basketball pretty heavily. And with Jamal Jr. up and coming and selecting a college, a lot of the attention he's getting is the pre, during, and post. So post meaning after, not the actual physical post. So a lot of the things that we're doing as a brand of Mashburn Enterprises to promote Jamal Jr. has been around that. So how do you lead into it? How do you do during it and get that degree of interactivity? And what's the post follow-up? I know it seems simplistic, but again, unless you're taking those things into consideration, that you measure twice and you cut once, so you know where you're trying to head. If you don't have those things in mind prior to the campaign, you're totally shooting yourself in the foot, because you're going to get more interactivity, more sharing, and more readability for sure.
Well, we're going to move on next and talk about Twitter and how Twitter's rebound is bringing about a lot of good news for the company. It's kind of a change of pace for them after the recent slate of headlines over the last couple of years. We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about our sponsor, Content Marketing World. Look, it is now just about a month from the conference. We're running out of time, people. If you want to get to this event, if you want to go and find out what Content Marketing World is about, even if you're just passingly interested, go to the site right now. Find out all the information, because this is one outstanding conference. And if you're an agency person out there, from an agency standpoint, they are absolutely in love with us. They want you to be at this event because they've already got all the major brands. They've got almost every major brand globally showing up to this thing. They've got 4,000 attendees. They don't really need agency people. They want agency people. They want to add agency people into the mix and give you a chance to share your expertise, but also to learn from the experts at brands and consultants alike about the best practices in content marketing out there right now. And they've got an exceptional lineup. I mean, like Henry Rollins is going to be headlining this thing. Mindy Kaling is going to be there. She's another headliner who's going to be at this event. Content Marketing World is the world's original and largest annual gathering of content marketing professionals, all coming to hear the latest thinking on every topic imaginable about content marketing. And when I say professionals offering great advice, we're talking about not just the big names that I mentioned. We're also talking about a lot of the names that you know from this show. And I know if you've listened to this program over the last couple months, you've heard me mention these names, but I'm going to name just a few of them again because I want you to remember how great these guests were. I mean, Scott Monty, he comes on the show all the time. Scott is incredible. He's one of the best speakers I've ever seen. He's going to be at this event. Lee Oden. Lee is like the de facto expert on SEO anywhere. I mean, he understood about content-driven SEO way before Google made the changes that made that essential to be part of the mix. He's not a gamer. He's somebody who puts together legitimate SEO programs. Scott Stratton, he's Mr. Unmarketing. Kate O'Neill, she's the Tech Humanist. She wrote the Tech Humanist book that's doing so well right now. Ann Handley wrote the book Content Rules. She was one of the first people to talk about content marketing. All of these people are going to be at this event. And agency people, they're going to be doing, like I said, special content just for you, an agency track of sessions, branded content tracks. And they're even going to do a free booze event. They're giving an agency exclusive cocktail hour. So you're getting free booze out of this. That's always a good sign. Plus, don't forget, with hundreds and hundreds of brands in attendance, that means hundreds and hundreds of new business prospects roaming the convention hall. There's really no good excuse for you not to want to be at this event, or at least send one member of your staff there. September 3rd is when it starts, and it runs through the 6th of September, and it's going to be in Cleveland, Ohio. So don't wait. I want you to go to contentmarketingworld.com right now. Use the offer code BeanCast when you get there. That's BeanCast, all caps. You got to do it that way. That's the way they have it set up. And they'll knock off $100 off your price. But even if you're not ready to register, go to contentmarketingworld.com and find out more about the event. See for yourself what an extraordinary event Content Marketing World is. And then think about it. Get involved. Talk to your boss. Talk to your finance guys. Find out how you can fund at least one person to go to this event, if not 10 people to go to this event. Register today, and I'll look for you at this year's event. Well, everyone is crowing about the seemingly dramatic rebound by Twitter. I mean, they've got a new policy about kicking off zero tolerance of bullying on the platform, except for the president. They've got daily active user counts up. They've got new subscribers. They've got a new platform, a new layout for the website. Jonathan, there's so many moves going on by Twitter right now, and I'm not really sure where to put the credit for the turnaround. What would you say is the one thing that's most responsible for the turnaround in Twitter's fortunes, and why people are starting to look again at Twitter as a growing platform and something worth participating in?
Okay. I have been chomping at the bit since I saw I was going to get this question.
I knew you were.
because Twitter purged a crap ton of my followers, and I got nothing but phone calls and resistance because of that. So people thought that I was just dumping them myself. Now, I will sum it up like this. Something smells good in Stinkville. I don't buy these statistics. I don't at all. And we can debate that all we want, but I'm telling you, they do this big, huge purge with what was the president's name again? Oh yeah, Trump. They I'm sorry, I try to forget. But there's a dump on him, Oprah Winfrey. By the way, I was just above Kathy Ireland in the dump, and somehow I got put in the New York Times for being dumped. But that being said, I think it's hard for me to believe that the year-over-year statistics, because it coincidentally switched 3 or 4 months after the move from DAUs to MAUs. They're saying monetizable daily active users versus daily active users. I think I don't want to overcomplicate this, but the statistics aren't adding up to me because they switched the way they're gathering the statistics to report a gain when they've been tanking and going downhill forever.
Well, if you're talking about monetizable active users, doesn't that include their off-the-site ads that they're running? I mean, because it's just like that's the truth. It's not an active user. That's just somebody seeing your ad.
Well, okay, monetizable that they saw it, that it made an impression, or you interacted with it, those are completely bipolar of each other. So I don't listen. I'll be honest. I do not believe the statistics. Now, if you say, well, okay, let's believe the statistics and that they are coming up, okay, then it's got to be because of their other properties. Because if you're going to say a monetizable active user, however you quantify that, how are they monetizable? What does that mean? Predictive modeling about the future potential of transaction? That's my question.
Well, daily active user is more of a. I mean, I know it says active, but it's more of a passive experience. It's like they logged on. They logged in.
That was very smart. That's a passive active user.
I mean, that's really true. I mean, a daily active user is not really indicative of how useful that person is to the brand who's advertising to them. It's just that they're logging in and somehow checking their account, so they're an active user. As opposed to a monetizable active user is somebody who is actively engaging with the content in a way that would be beneficial for a brand. So isn't monetizable active number, isn't that a better number to be dealing with and something that brands would be much more interested in knowing about? I mean, it sounds like that's a positive.
I think it is. No. I agree with you. I think that it is, if the word in quotes monetizable actually means that there's a predictive model behind behavior, because okay. I think it's a catch-all. That's and again, that's not because Twitter purged like 90% of my users or followers, but I think it's more because it's more of a catch-all term that they don't really that they can allow themselves to loosely provide a definition of.
So you're going with a conspiracy theory. So next we'll talk about what you think about the moon landing, but we'll get to that in just a minute.
Wait a minute. Wait, Bob. I don't know. I want your opinion on this. Do you think that by providing a new construct that it sounds a little bit fishy?
No, I totally see your point, that it's just like Twitter has been known to play with the numbers here and there to make sure that they look good in the eyes of investors. But there's seemingly a different tone to the way that they've taken so many steps that have been largely lauded by a number of the users. People are coming back. I mean, it's just like if they're saying subscriber numbers are up, I'm not sure how they're faking that. I mean, it's just like unless they're creating their own bots.
It's been done before. It's been done since the onset of the digital industry. And I'm sorry if I'm a broken record to any of the frequent listeners, but when I talked about hits on a web page, that was, the number of graphic downloads. It wasn't the number of visits.
Oh, right. I'm not stupid here. I understand that it's possible. It's possible
I'm saying that for anybody else who's listening.
Right, but it's possible that they're somehow, doing that. They're faking subscribers. But that would seem counterproductive when you're taking subscriber numbers down by eliminating all these bots and fake accounts.
I agree. I agree with you. But my question is not my positioning. My question is, if they're eliminating millions of new users, of visitors, of followers, if they're eliminating numbers, but their numbers continuously go up, and I can only speak from my account so I've got about 25,000 followers. If my interactivity degree has gone way down. And again, yes, it's a case study of one. We've got a ton of clients that have seen the same thing. I used to get 40 retweets, 30 retweets. Now I get maybe 5. And it's not like people are suddenly going, well, Sackett's full of it and we're not going to interact with them. I'm just seeing a huge something is wrong with the statistics as I'm seeing them both personally and professionally.
Well, that's the trouble with all social media. Social media is no longer a timeline. It's become something that is a news feed, which is curated to a certain extent by some kind of computer algorithm in the background saying this is important to you, this is not. So obviously you've been considered unimportant to a large group of your followers, so they're not seeing as many posts by you. That's the long-standing trope of everybody.
I really don't like your attitude, Bob.
Yeah, but that's the complaint. That's the complaint about the system. You can turn that off, but nobody does. Nobody knows how to.
That's absolutely right. But again, so listen, let's move off of that. I think they've found a way to reposition the statistics. That's what I think. But let's just say that I'm mistaken and that they are growing and that things are going well over there. So you're talking about a platform that I think it's about 85% of the revenue comes from ad sales, okay? And let's not forget that they also own, other properties that have. So Periscope obviously was a good one, but Telepart, Vine, any of these other ones, Crashlytics. I think that their data platform that they've got in place is very strong. So not only is it telling me where, when, what, why, and how, it's also telling me what, where, when, why, and how, and with whom. So like I know that for a lot of our client partners and a lot of our partners, period, within Mashburn Enterprises, there's a huge draw to that. So if their monetization is going up, I would say it's probably bent more towards the analytical platform because it is impressive. It really is. It's, I mean, you're not only able to see when something is getting served, when it's getting read, when it's getting interacted with, and particularly with the video expansion that they've allowed for and the redesign that they've had this week, which was clunky to me at first, but now I'm used to it. I think that the data is going to be key because it's going to be able to trigger and traject a hell of a lot of information.
That's an interesting approach to think of it from a standpoint of a data output that it's providing, because that's the way most people have valued Twitter in the marketing world for some time. I mean, the real-time interaction and real-time understanding of what people's sentiment is about a brand or about a topic or a subject or something. It's always been the most valuable asset here. Colin, what's your take on this? I mean, are they out of trouble? And more importantly, are the ad units that Twitter offers, are they competitive and as interesting to ad buyers now that they're making these changes as the other platforms?
Definitely not. But I think one of the things that we haven't talked about yet that in my opinion, is probably at least partially responsible for the lift is the way that they bring you into the platform now. They've done an excellent job of creating new content that hits me in other touch points that brings me to Twitter. So emails are very regular now. My notifications are more frequent than they ever were in the past, and they're very targeted. So specifically around, like Bob, you're a great example. Every time you tweet, I usually see that on 1 or 2 or 3 different touch points to get me to come check it out. So they're doing a really, really good job at bringing people into the platform. I think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing that uptick in daily active users. In terms of their overall, the ad units that they have themselves, I mean, they're not nearly as competitive as what you see on Instagram or Facebook. I think they have the potential to get there at some point, but right now it's like apples and orangutans. It's not even like the same species. So yeah, I can't attribute it to that. I think the concept that you put together, Jonathan, is novel, and I think it could be worth something, because that's one reason that we go to Twitter repeatedly, is for the data and the sentiment and the tracking. It's the most open platform in terms of the output that you can get, and understanding where your brand stands in the industry that it's in. So I think that's a really good observation, and probably one of the reasons why it's going to continue to grow. And if they can show that they can get the ne'er-do-wells, the trolls and all the rest of it off the platform and kind of clean it up a little bit, I think it would go really far in terms of the overall brand sentiment for Twitter itself, as opposed to just the people that are on it. Yeah,
I agree. And I think, listen, I don't want to lose this aspect of Bob's question, because the whole bullying thing, I mean, I think you guys both know I was part of WebWise Kids, which we also worked with Dateline on the To Catch a Predator initiative.
Right.
Listen, man, look, at the end of the day, anybody who bullies, there's no place in today's society for that stuff. And I think that there's also, I think Twitter has done a really good job of repressing those people, individuals, groups, whatever. I look, come on, we should be way past that by now. So that aspect of it and that component of it, I absolutely tip my hat to them, and I think it's wonderful. I just think that from a data standpoint in particular, that is such an enormous opportunity for cumulative knowledge, because in my humble opinion, a lot of our partners, a lot of our corporations under the umbrella, and a lot of the brands that we partner with, I don't think they're they historically have done a good job of working hand in hand with Twitter to say, what should we be doing? Have the data guide us. And is that data a self-fulfilling prophecy, or is that considered insight of something we should apply? That's where I'd like to see that conversation go, because it's so helpful to so many people for quick hits. And probably long term as well, but certainly the immediacy of it, I mean, that goes without saying, right?
Yeah, and certainly that fits into the model of the next topic that we're going to cover, which is the idea that everybody's interested in more and better data. So having that data stream coming from Twitter be more refined and be more useful is going to be helpful to everybody. Well, and speaking of that, there was a lot of news this week about the debate over agencies owning customer data. First, IPG bought Axiom, Publicis bought Epsilon, Dentsu bought Merkle. Agency networks are going all in on owning the entire data funnel, not just being a servicer or an analyst of data or a broker of data, but being an actual vendor of data, somebody who has first-party data for sale. But not everyone's agreeing with this strategy. I mean, over the past week, we've had Sir Martin being highly critical of this, whether or not it makes business sense to concentrate only on internally owned resources for understanding customers. John Wren, the CEO of Omnicom, he thinks vendor relationships with data vendors opens up more opportunities for thinks vendor relationships with data vendors opens more opportunities for marketing effectiveness. In other words, not dealing with internal resources, but working directly with outside vendors. And the new CEO of WPP's Group M thinks clients will become skeptical of being forced into internal data solutions, which makes a lot of sense. With so many first-party data solutions available out there, why would you want to be forced into just using this one small solution every single time, even if it's a large solution in-house? So, Colin, does owning end-to-end data solutions make sense for holding companies? Is this a wise strategy?
Yeah, I think ultimately right now you're seeing the upheaval in the industry because consultants are coming in. They have really shook up a tremendous amount of the services that are provided by agencies. So how do we get smarter? Obviously, we buy data. I think that it's going to be a play where you have a piece owning it is like going to be part of the portfolio. I think it was John Wren who said it. It can't be the only solution that you provide because the conflict of interest is so high. But if you say, hey, we've got, in the face of Axiom, I think they have 800 or 750 million transactions happen annually that they have access to data, 30 million people. That's a tremendous amount of inference that you can get from that, even if it's anonymized. If you have the actual first-party data associated with it, and you're willing to sell that or are capable of selling that to the brands, and you know what these people are purchasing, you know where they live, you know how many kids they have, all that stuff is super, super valuable to our brands. Our brands, at least the ones that I'm used to dealing with from a OTC perspective or a CPG perspective, are already removed, if not one, but two, sometimes 2 degrees from the transaction data, and they really don't know other than to say, okay, yeah, we had this much velocity from I&I data or from the retailer themselves, but they never get that real valuable first-party data. And I think if we can give them access to that, that's another huge feather in the cap of an agency or a holding company.
But it's kind of like if you have a kitten, and it's just like the kitten's really sweet, okay, and you can pet the kitten. But if you hold the kitten too tight and you squeeze that kitten and you let the kitten not eat outside of anything that you want to give it, and you never feed the kitten, it's just like that kitten's gonna die. And I'm like, that's a lot like what's going on with these data vendors. I mean, it's like if we buy them and take them inside, are we strangling them? Are we not giving them the access by not giving them the access to all these outside opportunities to interact with other agencies and other brands outside of the scope of the one agency network that now owns them? Do we strangle them and make them less effective over time? And is that a good strategy? I mean, doesn't it make sense to allow them to flourish out on their own and, do deals with them where you get preferential
Bob,
treatment
you
or
are
something?
way too morbid for me tonight.
I
You
literally
lost.
I
You
know
lost me
the
at
the,
strangling
the, the
a
kitten the kitten metaphor was bad, but it's just like, but it still works.
Bob,
I mean,
Bob, hold on a second. Let me ask you a question, okay?
what?
Are you coming at? Listen, you and I are good friends. I have mad respect for you. My question is this: do you think that you know the holding companies almost as well as I do, and I've been on the inside, and Martin Sorrell was my boss. Okay,
Right.
so in theory, is it a good position to be with the advertising agencies? Yes. In reality, is it going to chokehold, stranglehold, or reposition the facts versus the truth to the benefit of the holding company client? Yes.
Yes, and that's the core of the problem. And then you got add to that the fact that they're going to be buying something that they're not necessarily the experts in. Like, it's one thing when they're buying agencies, smaller agencies, and absorbing them into the bigger holding company, but they've been terrible about doing that. How much worse are they going to be about integrating in something that is foreign to the way that they do business?
Listen, it's related to, but more magnified than Google buying up companies, because Google has had a bad habit of buying up companies and then watering them down to the Google way. Google knows search, but then they're buying companies far, far outside of search. With the advertising agencies, now, I'm coming from this. I've worked for Omnicom, IPG, WPP, and I've been a chief at all of them. And I'll tell you something. That becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because those holding companies and those agencies, typically and historically, and I came from it, you're talking about a bunch of advertising and quote people that are going to bleed themselves on these companies. I absolutely believe that. I think that now, in an ideal situation, in an ideal setting, what you'd have is the holding companies possibly putting minimalistic investment so that they can have access to the data. So, hey, we're going in for a new business pitch for General Motors International. We need this information, and that's the extent of the relationship. That's one scenario. It's a completely different scenario to say, hey, we're WPP or Omnicom or Interpublic or anybody else, and we're going to own the company and the data. That is a dangerous perspective, and that's a dangerous way of looking at it, but it's also reality.
Colin, I mean, I'm sorry I interrupted you with my little rant here, but it's just like I just feel like
I think I had a rant
because
too,
because here's the long and the short of it. I have, if you would have asked me this last week, is it a good idea for agencies to buy companies like Axiom and Epsilon? I would have been wholeheartedly yes. I would be 100% yes. It makes sense for them to own these data companies because data is an increasingly important part of doing an effective advertising or marketing campaign. So it makes sense. But the objections that were voiced by some of these corporate leaders from the other holding companies who are obviously have an axe to grind and want to show that they're better, it's like, so I take it with a grain of salt. But the arguments made sense. I mean, doesn't it concern you that agencies are just going to muck with these data companies and not really get any value out of them?
I think that there's a high degree of possibility that could happen. I also feel like there's little, I mean, some of the experiences that I've had, even with the major agencies, they just don't have the horsepower to really use the data efficiently. Our clients, for the most part, aren't as sophisticated as we like to think that they would be, giving them access to this kind of stuff. But I think it is the future, right? And I'll go back to my original statement, which is if we're looking to mitigate the death of the agency, the best way to do it is to give them more tools, give them more understanding, make them more sophisticated than what we've been providing our clients for the last half a decade or more. So for me, I think it's a step in the right direction. I do hear the concerns. I think they're valid, but I don't think that any good marketer is going to say, yes, we bought this company and this is the one size fits all that you have to use. I think it's a piece of the solution that you need, and having that in house, even if it's just for doing some data mining for prospecting for new clients. What if it's for giving our clients a heads up as to what other people are buying in the space, so you have a competitive advantage. There's so many different ways that you could use it properly, and then not be the only source of information you have across the entire portfolio.
Colin, I totally agree with you. You're absolutely right, and I think that there is a good usage of data. There's a common usage of data, and there's also a futuristic way of looking at it. The only thing that I would add is this: I look at this as a government type of acquisition, where government takes over an industry because of a monopoly. Government breaks up a company because of a monopoly. Whatever. What ends up happening is you get absorbed into a fungus. And I remember my first chief job. I was chief digital officer for Arnold, and you know what happened? I naively moved to Boston, and now anybody listening from Arnold is going to interact with this show big time. But I went out there and I was naive, and I thought, well, I'm the chief digital officer and I know what I'm talking about, and I'm going to share all of this wealth of information, and we're going to pitch and win all this business and stuff. But what ends up happening at the corporate level of holding companies, and even at the corporate level of these agencies, is a new way of thinking doesn't get absorbed and socialized within the organization. It gets repressed. And I came in and all I heard was, what's a chief digital officer? And, well, wait a minute, we're a communications company, and we're cool and we're edgy. And I was trying to bring methodology and discipline to a digital interactive, but man, they weren't having it. And I don't know where they're at now, and I don't care. But the way you got to look at it as, it's a dangerous prospect, and albeit probably a necessary prospect that needs to be dealt with properly from the top down, that if you're bringing in a data component and you're no longer about edgy, creative, and coolness, and it's going to be founded in science, that is a good thing on paper. But in reality, if the right players aren't playing mental ping pong with it in the right way, it becomes dangerous and destructive.
Well, I want to move on to our last topic. I've got to move on to our last topic just because we're running out of time. And it fits right into this conversation, so we'll just keep rolling with it. New York City is going to prohibit the ability of mobile carriers to share location data of their customers with any marketers. I saw this and I was immediately concerned about whether or not this is going to become a trend, that we're going to see more locales follow suit. And if so, what is the impact on delivering contextually relevant messaging? I mean, Colin, this is one of those issues where I am in full support of privacy. If a user doesn't want their location shared, they shouldn't have it shared. But the idea that locales can come in and say, you're not allowed to share any location data from any of your users, actually kind of hampers the marketing efforts of all the small businesses throughout the city.
Yes, it's a huge issue, and one that I was kind of stunned when I heard about the first time. I think that it's very short-sighted. I think it's a knee-jerk reaction to a lot of different things that are happening across the board in terms of privacy and data, and what I think that I was going to bring it up for this particular topic. Go watch The Great Hack. There's way more things that we should be alarmed about in terms of how platforms and advertisers can use the data that they have of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Colin, you hit the nail on the head just now. Location is this big. The rest of it is much more severe. I don't know why I don't think, I agree with you, man. I don't think this is going to spread or infect. What I'm saying is I was more curious about, and I'm not looking at this from a conspiracy component, Bob. but
you would not believe how much email I get about your thoughts on that. I'll just let that slide.
You know what? I got to get some new friends. That's part of the problem here. I think, but in all sincerity, I think what Colin said hit the nail on the head. Number one, say location is not as big as content and the interactivity of content. So the content that I'm absorbing, the content that I'm publishing and providing, and the content that is being measured is probably a lot more important. Now, this also looks to me like a disjointed disconnect between governance, lobbyists, lawmakers, and the people who use it. Because if you ask me, if I want location-based advertising or something, I'm walking through Manhattan, I'm looking for the best Italian restaurant in the neighborhood I happen to be in, that's important to me, and I want that degree of intrusiveness. So that to me is the disconnect, and there's no conspiracy there. There's only looking at it from the lens of usability, customization, and personalization of the things that are important to me.
And I'll tell you, like, one of the things that I think consumers will ultimately want, it's not just the restaurant, situation. Like, I'm just full transparency. I'm an active member of a piece of technology called Pull that actually uses your location and allows you to remember the people and places that you've interacted with over the course of the day and add those contact informations with a click of a button.
All right, well, Colin, now because you told me that, A, I don't trust you, and B, I'm never using that because I don't want anybody to know anything about me.
Yeah. I mean, like, for some people, though, like if I walk into a boardroom and I'm sitting down with 7 people that I just met, rather than collecting their business cards and manually typing that stuff into my phone, I've just hoovered those 7 people's contact information, of course, with their permission. But the idea that would be now a functionality that has been taken off the table, or Foursquare or Yelp or any of these places that literally exist just to pair people with the location that they're at and something cool or fun to do or a nice place to eat. I mean, that all goes away. That seems ridiculously medieval. It almost is like taking us back to the dark ages of digital. So I don't understand why this one component is such a lightning rod. I mean, I understand that there's tons of stickiness associated with the topic of data privacy for lawmakers and for our politicians, but this is like the most ham-handed way to go about it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was surprised that that's the starting point.
Yeah, it does seem weird, especially since context is probably the least intrusive of all the opportunities that we have to understand somebody. I mean,
Well, Bob, that and we've never been to the moon. So I don't know, man. I don't know where is this society going?
All right, on that note, it's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Colin Glom. You can find him at, what is the address of AFG? I forget.
It's afg1.com.
afg1.com. That's the number 1, not just spelling out 1. So afg1.com. Tell us what's going on in your world, Colin. What would you like to promote?
I would love to promote one of my clients is Clear Eyes. We're doing an event with them. It's a really awesome platform. It's a opportunity to let people who would be otherwise unsung or don't have their day in the sun to shine. So the platform is going to be during New York City Fashion Week. We've got a bunch of young designers who are coming from all over the globe, and they get an opportunity to present during New York City Fashion Week, and Clear Eyes is going to be hosting that. It's on September 7th at a place called the Union West on 28th Street. So if you guys want to come out, look up nolcha.com and see if you can get a ticket. It'd be a lot of fun.
Awesome. That sounds great. Yeah, we'll have to talk about that after the show. Next up, Jonathan Sackett. You can find him at allscope.com. That's where he is the president and chief creative officer. Tell us what's going on in your world, Jonathan. What would you like to promote?
First of all, as always, I want to promote the BeanCast. Bob is one of my closest friends, and he has been for about a decade, maybe more. It's a great people on the show. Colin is also great. Listen, to do business with these guys is to succeed, and I firmly believe that. They're great people. Now, we've got I'm also working with Revolution Cannabis, and we've got some big announcements coming out in press. If you look up press releases on them, Tony Hunter is the chairman of the board, and I'm so proud of him, really good friend of mine. We're working right now on 3 reality shows with Jamal Mashburn and Jamal Jr., one with me on the advertising industry, and that's all I can say about that right now. And the third is with Revolution Cannabis. So I don't get a lot of sleep these days, and there's so many great things going. But listen to the BeanCast. Colin, do business with him because he's awesome, and watch out for me and Jamal and Allscope and everything else going on because a lot of stuff's coming.
That sounds great. I'll be looking forward to it. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to advertise on this program. I do great live reads. So check it out at thebeancast.com.
Just ask him, he'll tell you.
I'll tell you every time. That's the whole idea. I do live reads.
Hello.
Now it's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, the good. I love this story, Colin. As 2 million people supposedly prepare to storm Area 51 on September 20th, Jonathan, you've got to be signed up for this, right?
Oh, here we go.
Arby's is sending their Arby's roadside meat house to feed anyone who actually does show up for this event. The reason I love this is because a lot of brands are joking about it because let's face it, it's kind of a joke. I'm sure some people are taking it very seriously, but most people are just joking here by going here. A lot of brands were jumping on board and playing along with the joke. Arby's actually did something. They put together an actual truck that's going to go to Area 51 and feed people.
Okay, Bob, listen, you either ignite social chatter or tap into social vernacular, but I didn't want to bring this up, but now I have to. One of the shows we're working on is called Arby's and Aliens, so be on the lookout.
Oh my God.
Nice.
Well, from the bad stem, go ahead, Colin.
I'm going to jump in on this because I don't know if you guys have seen on the History Channel. I'm recommending a lot of TV lately for some reason. Go watch Unidentified, a six-part episode featuring people from as high up in the government as the Assistant Secretary of Defense, many naval aviators, radar people, all of them having had some kind of paranormal experience that they couldn't understand based on seeing stuff and physically identifying it on radar. I think there's going to be much more movement in this direction, maybe not just because people are going to storm Area 51, but I think there's more truth is going to continue to come out. And I think this conversation is right for brands to try and get involved in it. There's a universal desire to understand what's going on outside of our planet. And I think that there's more people that have more knowledge than we've previously been led to know. So I think it's kind of interesting debate, even if it's made fun of and kind of a branding opportunity from Arby's. I think it's an interesting debate to get involved in from a brand standpoint.
That's really interesting. Very, very good points. Well, let's move on to the bad for the week. The bad this week was Forever 21 may have wanted to reconsider their inclusion of Atkins diet bars. You remember the Atkins diet, the no carb diet. Inside, they included Atkins diet bars inside every one of their e-com purchases. The problems started, though, when people who ordered plus size items, Colin, began to feel judged by this. I mean,
oh my God,
who doesn't take the time to realize that if we're putting Atkins diet bars in plus size orders, that maybe we're fat shaming? Nobody thought of that.
Yeah, just ridiculous. I mean, it's like something that was said in a board meeting and shouldn't have gotten, or in a conference room somewhere, and shouldn't have gotten past that initial stage. It's amazing to me that something like this was actually executed.
Well, you know what? And also, it's like going to an AA meeting sponsored by Miller Lite. I mean, come on.
Okay, I don't know that it is, but
to me it is. I don't know.
All right. Going to the ugly of the week. The ugly this week was presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard wanted to capitalize on people searching her name after what was arguably a pretty admirable performance in the first Democratic primary debate. Unfortunately, though, Google decided to just suspend her ad account right at that moment, right the day after this whole debate went down, for what they were calling routine account verification. Gabbard obviously did not get to capitalize on people searching her name, and now she's suing Google for an extraordinary amount of money. I mean, Jonathan, what's your thoughts on this one? I mean,
There
it's
is
just like
absolutely no conspiracy here at all. You're talking to a guy who got purged of almost his entire Twitter account. I don't understand this. And the timing to me looks questionable. I'm not saying there's something behind it. I'm saying there's something behind it.
yeah, I'm kind of with you on that.
Yeah, that's
it's kinda
weird.
crazy that
That's awfully coincidental timing. And I'm putting sarcastic air quotes around that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I thought, well, it was interesting to find out it was only for 6 hours. So that's, if there's anything, at least if it was a routine red flag, I can't believe that they would have it back up and running in just 6 hours. That to me,
Yeah, okay. I'm glad you brought that up, Colin, because that was a strange window. Like, why 6 hours?
yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of questionable things about it, so it definitely makes the
Yeah.
ugly for this week. Well, have a suggestion for this list or future lists, or just want to discuss the list? Comment online, use the hashtag GBU, that's pound GBU. I'll be looking for your comments. Well, that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. It's just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.